at the buzzer to make it academic. 144-93. A 51-point defeat at the hands of the Memphis Grizzlies.
Well, Tim Roy just summed it up right there, didn't he? That was, again, voice of the Warriors, Tim Roy, on here on 95.7 The Game just a little bit ago as the Warriors fall in Memphis to the Grizzlies. Final score, 144-93, a 51-point loss. That is the largest margin in an NBA game this season. Not just for the Warriors, not just for the Grizzlies, for any NBA game this year, a 51-point margin of victory for the Grizzlies or a 51-point margin of defeat for the Warriors, the largest margin in an NBA game so far this year. And as you heard Tim Roy say, the Warriors now 2-9 in their last 11 games. That comes after a 12-3 start. One of the best teams in the NBA, their first 15, one of the worst teams in the NBA over their next 11, the last 11 games played. They were down by as many as 57 points in this one. They ultimately lose by 51. In this game, it was over essentially midway through the second quarter. The Warriors trailed by 22 after one. It was 37-15. The first quarter was as ugly as basketball gets. The Warriors made just 4 field goals in the first quarter, committed 8 turnovers. Memphis, from the field, shot nearly 54% in the first quarter. They made 7 3-pointers in the first quarter. How about this? At halftime, the Memphis bench outscored the Warriors team. At halftime, the Memphis bench, 43 points. The Warriors' entire team, 38 points. The Memphis bench in the first half out-rebounded the whole Warriors team, 22-21. That's rebounds for the Memphis bench, 22. Rebounds for the whole Warriors team in the first half, 21. And at halftime, the Warriors made 11 field goals and committed 11 turnovers. That was as ugly as basketball gets. And the fact that it came after the Warriors had 3 full days off, it is absolutely unforgivable the way that this Warriors basketball team played out in Memphis tonight. And really, it goes even further than just the 3 days off that they just had, because remember, they played in Houston last Wednesday, now 8 days ago. The 91-90 rough loss where they could not get a bucket down the stretch, where there was the loose ball foul or the foul on Kuminga, like 80 feet from the basket, on a loose ball. Ultimately, the Rockets recovered it, whatever. Foul called. Jalen Green makes both free throws. Warriors lose that game. We know how that one went. Then you had 3 days off leading up to the Dallas game. Then against Dallas, you give up 143 points, including 46 in the first quarter. Now, you did score a lot, so the game was semi-competitive, and it was up in the air for the majority of the game, but still, you're not kidding anybody. That was a pretty bad performance as well. Then you have 3 more days off, plus you're buoyed by the acquisition of Dennis Schroeder, and it comes at a perfect time because you have 3 days off and 2 practice days to get him, introduced into the offense and the defense and the philosophy and the scheme and all that. And then you follow all that up with this stinker of a performance. There is absolutely no reason the Warriors should come out and look like they did in this one. This is now multiple games, consecutive games for the Warriors, where it looks like they're playing their third game in 4 nights in the back end of a back-to-back, and they're in their third city in 4 days. Yet the Warriors are as rested as they will ever be all season, other than right after the All-Star break, and they put up this performance. 144-93, the final score. The Warriors lose by 51, the largest margin in a game in the NBA so far this season. And it is hard to make sense of just how bad this Warriors team played. Memphis is a very quality basketball team, there's no doubt. They're now 19-9. They're as healthy as they've been all season, and they're looking like a legitimate threat in the Western Conference. This is a quality basketball team, and right now the Warriors look like one of the worst teams in the Western Conference. 2-9 in their last 11, and I don't even know what to tell you about the way they played today. Look, it's one thing to see Dennis Schroeder look a little bit uneven in his debut. He's trying to learn a new system on the fly, and if you expected Schroeder to come out and go 7 for 12 from the field and score 20 points and dish out 7 assists, Very unlikely. He had a bad day, 2 for 12 from the field in his debut. All right, whatever. You can brush that under the rug. But the effort and the lack of intensity and the lack of focus and all the same mistakes that have haunted the Warriors time after time after time this season, I mean, they showed up again in this one. We'll get to all of that and a whole lot more. It's Warriors Wrap Up on 95.7 The Game. Mark Randy with you as we try to make sense of, again, a rough Warriors loss, 144-93, a 51-point loss for the Warriors at the hands of the Memphis Grizzlies. It's Mark Randy with you again here on Warriors Wrap Up. If you want to join the conversation, you can shoot me a text or give me a call. The number for both, including the Comcast Business text line, is 888-957-9570. Again, that's 888-957-9570. The 510 already chiming in on the Comcast Business text line. Does anyone really believe that the Warriors are still contenders after they were handled by the Memphis Grizzlies? Well, 510, the last 11 games suggest the Warriors aren't just not contenders, but they are one of the worst teams in the Western Conference. 2-9 are the Warriors in their last 11 games. And like, teams are going to go through stretches where they struggle. Like, you're going to have games like this. And in fact, there's some really odd statistics about the Warriors and getting blown out. How about this? In each of the last 6 seasons, the Warriors have had at least one game where they've trailed by at least 45 points in each of the last 6 seasons. And that includes playoff games. When they won the championship in 2022, there was a moment where they trailed by at least 45. And by the way, it happened in the building that it happened in tonight. Remember, Game 5, 2022 in Memphis? The Warriors trailed by as many as 55 points in that game. They trailed by 57 at one point tonight, which, by the way, is the second largest deficit that Steve Kerr has faced as head coach of the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors trailed by 61 in 2021 against the Raptors. You remember the game in Boston last year where the game was over at halftime? The Warriors trailed by 56, but again, 57 points with the deficit at one point tonight, 55 in Memphis in Game 5 in 2022. But the Warriors kind of have a habit of putting a game like this together once or twice every season, even when they're a really, really good basketball team, like in 2022. Hell, I mean, they weren't a really good basketball team last year or the year prior, but they're a quality basketball team. They're a better basketball team than most in the NBA the last 2 years. Not that they were good by any, very good by any stretch, but they were decent, and they put together performances like this almost every single year. Doesn't mean that this is excusable. That's not the point. It's just kind of what happens for the Warriors. But where the Warriors are running into an issue now is this is becoming a lot more common. I know last time against Dallas wasn't really the same because the offense was there, but you give up 143 points at home to the Dallas Mavericks. You follow it up by giving up 144 points tonight. How about this? Combined in the last 2 games, the Warriors are allowing opponents to score 143.5 points per game. Opponents are shooting nearly 57% from the field against the Warriors in the last 2. And over the last 2 games, opponents had made 48 threes on 89 attempts. That's 53.4% from downtown. And this is a Warriors team that has largely been very good defensively so far this year. The last 2 games, though, coming off of 3 days of rest on each of those games, they put together their 2 worst defensive performances of the season. And tonight, you might say it's their worst offensive performance, at least when the game really was in the air in the first half. It really wasn't really in question, even close to halftime. The game was over like 2 minutes in to the second quarter. But combined defense and offense, by far the Warriors' worst effort of the night tonight. And you can make a case that Sunday in Dallas is up there for a close second, at the very least defensively. And it's utterly inexcusable the way that it went down, because the Warriors, again, 3 days off before Dallas and 3 days off before this one. And it felt like the Warriors were disinterested tonight. You saw it from the jump. First 4 possessions of this basketball game, Desmond Bane hits a 3. Then Draymond drives and throws a wild pass for a turnover. Leads to a 3 for Memphis again, and then Draymond on the other end, a moving screen. The Warriors were down 6-0 like 45 seconds into this game and hadn't even attempted a shot because of a couple of bad turnovers, and then Memphis threes on the other end. Memphis made 27 threes tonight, which a new franchise record for the Grizzlies. It's also the same number of threes the Warriors made on Sunday against Dallas, a game in which the Warriors lost. Now, teams when making 27 or more threes in NBA history are 12-1. Memphis was the 12th team to make 27 or more and win. The one team that lost when making 27 or more threes, the Warriors, on Sunday. The Warriors are making an awful lot of history, and not the good kind of late. And, you don't expect the Schroeder acquisition to immediately turn everything around, but you at least expected, off of the amount of time the Warriors had off, a little bit more energy and enthusiasm and fight, and it just felt like the Warriors laid down after the first 8 minutes of this basketball game. And then it was, all right, let's pack it up. We're done here. We'll get on a plane and head to Minnesota and hope for better results there. That's not going to cut it in the NBA when you're taking on teams like Memphis and Minnesota and Dallas. This is a tough Western Conference, and you can't just let these games fly by over and over and over again. Okay, it's Warriors wrap-up here on 95.7 The Game. Mark Randy with you. Let's go out to the phone lines. We got time for all you guys tonight, and also on the Comcast Business text line. It's the same number for both, 888-957-9570. Jose in Mountain View kicks us off. What's up, Jose? You're on Warriors wrap-up with Mark Randy. I don't even really want to ask you what you think about that basketball game, because I have a feeling I know how you feel. What's on your mind, Jose?
Hey, well, here's the thing, right? I've been a long-time Warriors fan since I was a kid, even before Run TMC, so I've seen it all. But this is really disappointing because of the standards that we've had. So my question is pretty simple, and you've asked this already, right? Which is the real Warriors team, the one from the last 12, 13 games, or the first 12, 13? I don't understand how you can have such a drop-off in talent and results. And my question is it that the talent's that poor? In reality, is it really that poor, or is it the coaching that they don't respond to Steve Kerr anymore? Which one is it? Because right now, I can't make sense of anything that I'm seeing when you have proven stars and some young guys coming up, but then in the end, it's disaster. This is unacceptable, man.
Yeah, Jose, you're absolutely right. And you ask a really, really good question. And just to lay out the point that you are asking one more time, the Warriors in their first 15 games were 12-3. 12-3 and were atop the Western Conference. Since then, in their last 11, they're 2-9. Let's just run through those 11 games really quick. You had the 5-game losing streak, San Antonio, Brooklyn, Oklahoma City. All three of those games were really, really close. You feel like you probably could have beat San Antonio and Brooklyn. OKC, really good team, and Steph Curry didn't play in that game. Okay, whatever. Then you lose in Phoenix. That's a really good team, and you never really were in that game. At Denver, you lose by 4. That was a game you also feel like you should have won. Okay, 5-game losing streak, get back on track, right? Then you beat Houston in a game where both Stephen Curry and Draymond Green do not play, and you felt like that might jumpstart them. And then you put together, maybe up to that point, one of your worst efforts of the season at home against Minnesota. You lose by 17. Then you play Minnesota again 2 days later, and that's approaching a couple of weeks ago now. And you lose that one to Minnesota, or you win that one against Minnesota, to get the split in that mini baseball series. And then you now have 3 straight losses since. The rough loss in Houston, 91-90. Clay's dominance and Luka's dominance for Dallas against the Warriors on Sunday when you lose by 10, giving up 143 points. And then tonight in Memphis, the Warriors' worst performance of the season, bar none. You lose by 51, 144-93. So the question that Jose asks is, what's the real Warriors? Is it the team that started 12-3, or is it the team that's 2-9 in their last 11 games? This is probably a boring answer, Jose, and I apologize. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. The reality of the Warriors' first 15 games was they got fat on a relatively weak schedule. I know they had a win over Boston. They had a win over Oklahoma City. They beat Dallas in that stretch. They beat Memphis in that stretch. but you look at some of the individual games and who they played and who was active and available in those games, like the Memphis win isn't against this Memphis team. John Morant did not play. I think Desmond Bane also did not play when the Warriors beat Memphis. So you also had a win over Portland, right? You had 3 wins over New Orleans, and you caught them they've been this way all season, but without like any of their key players. That includes a win over Washington on the road. That includes a win over Atlanta. And Atlanta, they have a couple of nice wins, but they're not a super good basketball team. So I think the 12-3 record, not that it was a total mirage, but it was what the Warriors needed to do against that portion of their schedule. You got to get fat. You're taking on teams that you're better than. You simply got to win those games. And they did, but I think a lot of us maybe looked at the 12-3 beginning as, oh, this team's back. They're going to win 55 games. They're going to be a top 4 seed in the West, and we got a chance to win championship number 5. I think we probably all overreacted just a little bit. I think the key now is also not overreacting to how bad this looks, because it certainly does look bad, but the reality is this Warrior team is probably somewhere between the 12-3 team that began and the team that's now 2-9 in their last 11. Now, to answer the other part of your question, Jose, and I'll get to that in just a second, because I do want to remind you that you're listening to 95.7 The Game, KGMZ FM and HD1 San Francisco, an Odyssey sports station, always live on the free Odyssey app, Twitch and YouTube, powered by First NorCal Credit Union. For a low-rate auto loan, apply online or just ask for First NorCal financing at the dealer. To answer your other question, Jose, is this team more lack of talent, or is it, I don't know, Steve Kerr's message that isn't quite fitting or that isn't being received anymore? It's probably a little bit of both, honestly. I think there is a relatively clear statistical, we can prove statistically, I think, that this is a Warriors roster that is still relatively top-heavy. The difference with Steph Curry on the floor versus off the floor is still as stark as it's always been. And in fact, it's probably more stark than it has been in the past, because the Warriors haven't been able to find all season, and this is why they acquired Dennis Schroeder, and why I think if they're legitimately trying to win meaningful games this year, they will make another trade. But there hasn't been a consistent scorer next to Stephen Curry all season. Buddy Hield was that early through like the first 10 games, and it was going great. Again, part of that was also who you were playing. But when Buddy Hield was going great, you had a legit number 2 scorer who could give you 16, 17, 18 or more a night, and could do it in ways that no one else on the Warriors roster could do in terms of from downtown. Again, other than Stephen Curry. But I don't know if you noticed, Buddy Hield was playing garbage time tonight. That's how much he's been struggling of late. He had some good moments against Minnesota in that win, and has had moments here or there the last few weeks, but for the most part, it's been a dry spell for Buddy Hield. When you have all of the inconsistency that the Warriors have offensively behind Stephen Curry, there just is not enough firepower, and Steph cannot do it himself. He's still awesome, and he's still a legitimate number 1 on a team that can compete for a championship. He just can't do as much heavy lifting as he once did. Again, the numbers are very, very stark. Offensive rating is near 115 when he's on the floor. It drops down to near 100 when he's off the floor. The Warriors are one of the best offenses in the league when Steph Curry's on the court, and one of the worst when he's not. He needs help. It's pretty simple. Now, the flip side of that, and this is what Jose was getting at, is I also think there's a little bit of stubbornness in which the way the Warriors run things. And I think there's a lot of frustration, I think specifically in terms of how Jonathan Kuminga has been handled. And this isn't me saying Kuminga is the key to turning this whole thing around, and Steph Curry, time to hand over the keys to this young guy, Jonathan Kuminga, and allow him to take you somewhere. Like, that's not what this is. But given what the Warriors currently have on the roster, and again, maybe this changes with Dennis Schroeder, and you can throw tonight out the window for Schroeder. This is not, just because he had a bad debut does not mean he's going to be a bad acquisition. I thought Schroeder, for what the Warriors gave up to get him, essentially a net of 2 second-round picks and an undrafted free agent rookie, home run, absolute home run acquisition. So don't worry about Dennis Schroeder. I think he's going to bring a lot of positives to the Golden State Warriors. But specifically pre-Dennis Schroeder acquisition, it has not made any sense to me the way the Warriors have handled Jonathan Kuminga. They've been trying to fit a square peg into a round hole with Kuminga for his entire career. And really last year and this year, Kuminga does not work in the Warriors' motion offense, in their read and react. He's more of a guy in today's style of basketball where it's, get me the ball, maybe I'll use a screen and roll, and I'm going to try to ISO and drive, get fouled, get a bucket down low. And, every once in a while I'll drive and I'll kick to an open shooter in the corner, and I could spot up in the corner and maybe knock down an open three here or there. But Kuminga is at his best when the ball is in his hands, you use a screen, and you get to the rim. Now, that might not be good enough to really help the Warriors, but given what the Warriors have on this roster, I don't know what the other option is to take some of the burden off of Stephen Curry. But instead, what the Warriors have been trying to do is to force Kuminga to fit into the scheme that they're playing, that they have been playing for a decade. And I know it's hard to try to adjust and to be willing to allow this 22-year-old to, the freedom to do something different, because what you have been doing has won you 4 championships. But it seems relatively clear that Kuminga's strengths do not align with the way that this Warriors team is run. And maybe this is then a failure of not execution now, but of planning. And maybe it's a failure of roster construction, right? Like, if Kuminga is going to be a guy who can help you, you need to put him in the best situation to succeed. And that hasn't happened. Now, you could fire back at me, and you'd be entirely fair to do so. And please do. 888-957-9570. That's both the Comcast Business text line and the number to call. 888-957-9570. You could fire back at me, well, Kuminga simply is not good enough. Okay, that's entirely fair. Then I'll just ask you, why is he on the roster? Why is he on the roster? And maybe that changes in a month. As the trade deadline approaches and the Warriors are rumored to be involved in so many different discussions for big names like Jimmy Butler and Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram and maybe lesser names like Nikola Vucevic and Cam Johnson. Maybe that changes. But if you are unwilling to adjust your style of play to the strengths of a player who might be able to take some of the burden off of your aging superstar, then I don't understand keeping him on the roster and trying to force a square peg into a round hole. I think there's also a larger point in terms of the Warriors' effort and their energy and their enthusiasm and their seeming inability to just take care of the basketball. And tonight wasn't terrible in terms of turnovers. It wasn't good by any stretch, but 18 turnovers. The Warriors have had a lot more in games. It really was just the first quarter that did you in turnover-wise. You committed 18 turnovers in this game. In the first quarter, you had 8 of them. Memphis turned 18 turnovers into 31 points off turnovers. You keep having games like this. You have performances defensively where now in consecutive games, and this might be the most frustrating thing of all, and this is just in the last 2 games specifically, where on every single drive that the Warriors are defending, whether it was Luka Doncic on Sunday or Ja Morant tonight, the Warriors are leaving great three-point shooters in the corner. They are just leaving them. They are helping off the corners to defend against the drive. And they're leaving time and time and time again wide open three-point shooters in the corner. The corner three, welcome to the modern NBA. The corner three is the most efficient shot in basketball, and the Warriors are getting killed at that spot. Jerry Stackhouse essentially brought in to be the defensive coordinator, and through 15 games, really through like 23 23 games, 24 games, felt pretty darn good. The last 2 games, though, is bad. I don't understand what's gotten into the Warriors defensively, the last 2 games. It makes no sense what the Warriors have been doing. Every single drive, go back, watch back some of the tape. On these made threes, it is the Warriors crashing on drives, and it is leaving open corner three-point shooters. And even if they can recover out to the corner by the time the pass gets out there, then they're in a scramble mode, and either the Mavs on Sunday or the Grizzlies tonight, they're passing the ball along the perimeter, the Warriors scrambling, they cover one, they come off one guy to cover the other, and so on and so forth, all the way until it swings around. You eventually get an open 3, or you get a pump fake and a flyby, and you drive and you get an easy layup. The Warriors are committing so many mistakes by just committing to drives and leaving good three-point shooters open. And it's the opposite of what they've been doing for the first 23 games of the year. The last 2 games, it makes no sense, and it has been incredibly frustrating to watch this Warriors basketball team play defense. That's how bad it's been. 144 points tonight for Memphis, 143 points on Sunday for the Dallas Mavericks. And those are the Warriors' only 2 games over their last 8 days. It makes no sense. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we got more to get to. Plus, we'll hear from Steve Kerr. We'll hear him try to explain away tonight's effort. I'm not so sure he can do that. That's coming up on the other side. It's Warriors Wrap-Up. Mark Randy with you. More time for your calls, your texts, 888-957-9570. We're back with more Warriors Wrap-Up after the Dubs. Lose by 51 tonight in Memphis. Yikes. We got a lot more to get to next here on 95.7 The Game.
Now back to Warriors Wrap-Up on 95.7 The Game.
Yeah, that highlight you just heard, Stephen Curry with the steal, his 1,500th in his career. That's the 53rd player now, Stephen Curry, the 53rd player in NBA history to reach the milestone. Only 4 players have career numbers of at least 24,000 points, 6,000 assists, and 1,500 steals. Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. You can add Stephen Curry to that list. So 5 players now with Stephen Curry accomplishing that with his 1,500th steal tonight. That was about the only positive that came from tonight. Maybe you could include Brandon Podziemski in the second half, although I hear all of you who say it's garbage time, does not really matter. Fair, although for someone who has struggled as much offensively to find a rhythm as Podziemski has, it's a good sign for sure. Now we'll see how he plays next time out when the Warriors are in Minnesota to take on the T-Wolves coming up on Saturday. More on that in a little bit. But as we get back to the doom and gloom of this Warriors season right now, 2-9 in their last 11, how about this statistic for you? Stephen Curry, 2 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, 0 for 7 from the field, 2 for 2 from the free throw line in 24 minutes and 22 seconds on the court tonight. It is the 3rd game of his NBA career where he goes without a made field goal while playing 10 or more minutes, and the 1st game of his NBA career where he goes without a made field goal while playing 15 or more minutes. So a first for Stephen Curry tonight without a made field goal while playing more than 15 minutes tonight. You pair that with the fact that Draymond Green went 0 for 4. This is the first time in the long, historic careers of Stephen Curry and Draymond Green that they have finished without a combined made field goal in a game they both played in. In every other instance where Stephen Curry and Draymond Green have taken the floor together, they've combined for at least 1 made field goal, at the very least. Not tonight. They go a combined 0 for 11, and the Warriors get blown out by 51 points against the Memphis Grizzlies. And tonight, in my mind, absolutely inexcusable. If this is the 3rd game in 4 nights on a road trip where you're bouncing around all over the place on the East Coast and you're off a back-to-back where you got in at like 2 a.m. the morning of the game, okay, you come out with that kind of effort, we can kind of write that off. All right, that was a scheduled loss. It's a tough game. It's a really good team who, by the way, kind of had this game circled. Talking in the post-game presser after the Warriors beat Memphis in November, head coach Taylor Jenkins of the Memphis Grizzlies said, "I can't wait for December 19th. Like, this is a game that Memphis had circled for a while. So the way they came out makes perfect sense. The way the Warriors came out makes absolutely no sense. This game was over like 2 minutes into the second quarter. The Warriors seemed disinterested. They seemed tired. They seemed like they frankly did not care about this basketball game. And after 3 days off, buoyed by the emotional high of acquiring Dennis Schroeder nearly for free, and this is how you come out and look. Ugly, ugly, ugly. We will hear, I'll read you some of the things that Steph Curry has said post-game. That's coming up. But first, we got to hear from Warriors head coach Steve Kerr, because I want to hear him try to explain this one away. You lose by 51. You had 3 days off, and there's really nothing good that can come out of this basketball game. So let's hear from Steve Kerr. We'll react to that. We got plenty more time for your phone calls and your texts. 888-957-9570. Line them up now while we listen to Steve Kerr. We'll hear from you guys coming up in just a sec. But here is Warriors head coach Steve Kerr after the Warriors' 51-point loss in Memphis tonight. Here's the coach.
It was just a humbling night all around. I mean, they took it to us. They were great. We just couldn't get anything going first quarter. They took us out of their stuff. They did a great job defensively, and everything just went south from there. So give them credit. But we got a lot of work to do, clearly.
When you say it's humbling, does that mean, you can take things from this experience and move forward from it?
Humbling means what it means, right? You lose by 51. That's humbling. So, what I know about this team, I mean, this is the second time we've been blown out. We got blown out in Cleveland early in the season. So I know who we are. I know what our team is about. I know we've got competitors. I know we're going to bounce back and we're going to regroup. So I'm not concerned about that, but we got a lot of work to do to execute and learn how to execute under pressure and take care of the ball and get good shots. And so we'll, as I said, regroup tomorrow in Minneapolis and have a practice and get ready to go Saturday.
Steve, how much of this was trying to incorporate Dennis, a new player, into the mix, or just the cumulative effect of losing 9 of 11 now?
Dennis looked like a guy on a new team. It's always very difficult to get traded mid-season and play with a brand new group and have different terminology and all that stuff. But look, they did a great job on Steph, denying him everywhere, making his every catch difficult. And so this was about Memphis. They've been one of the hottest teams in the league, and they played a great game. They made 27 threes, 27 for 48. But it was their defense early on that took us out of what we were trying to do, and I give them credit for it. And yeah, we've lost 9 out of 11. So we're reeling, and we gotta get it back clearly.
With J.K. going back to the bench, what did you take from his 6 games in the starting lineup?
Yeah, J.K. has bounced in and out of the lineup, starting, coming off the bench. I really like his scoring off the bench. Tonight wasn't his night, but it wasn't any of our nights, including mine. So, I don't take anything from anyone's individual performance. It's a collective, team thing. And that's been the challenge here this year is, figuring out the combinations, the best combinations, putting together the puzzle and trying to help each guy be the best version of himself. And so that's the challenge. We got to figure that out, and, we'll keep moving forward.
A couple of frightening things there from Steve Kerr, and that was Steve Kerr post-game press conference here on Warriors wrap-up after the Warriors lose by 51 to the Memphis Grizzlies tonight on the road. They're at the very end. He is, and this is he's not wrong. I'm not saying I disagree with Steve Kerr, but the fact that 26 games in, he's talking about how they still need to figure out all the pieces to the puzzle. That's a major issue. That is a gigantic red flag waving in the wind. You are 26 games in, and you're still trying to figure out the pieces to the puzzle. What combinations work. That's what the first 26 games are for. That's what the first 15 games are for. Steve Kerr has said multiple times, right around 20 games in, right, you get to the quarter pole of the season, 20 games out of an 82-game season essentially is 1/4 of the way there. You should have a very good sense of who your team is, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what units work, what units don't work, what's your go-to unit, what is your absolute stay-away unit at all times. It feels like the Warriors are flying blind. They're 26 games in, and they don't know what the hell works. They don't know what the hell works. That's what the Warriors feel like right now. And it gets back to what we talked about before the break. It's this Warriors season doesn't. Obviously, there's a lot of frustrating things and moments and pieces and execution and turnovers and lack of attention to detail and inability to make an open three and struggles to close games, and all those things are true and they're real. But those are also things that a lot of NBA teams go through throughout a season, right? Like, those aren't exclusive to the Warriors. What feels exclusive to this basketball team is, again, what Steve Kerr's talking about, that they're still trying to figure out the pieces to the puzzle. And at a certain point, what you have to admit, let's pretend you're actually building a puzzle. You're putting together a puzzle, right? It's what my family and I always do around the holidays. I'm sure when I go back up to my parents coming up next week for Christmas, there's going to be a puzzle on, the kitchen counter, and we're going to be working around it like a family. And eventually you get to a point where you realize, we're missing a couple of pieces. Or there's a couple of pieces that are in this box that don't go to this puzzle. And somehow over the last, few years, they got all mixed up. The Warriors don't have a complete puzzle. Or they have a puzzle, they're picking from pieces out of a box that includes pieces from multiple different puzzles. Their puzzle does not fit. Like 26 games in, and you're still talking about trying to make the puzzle pieces fit. The reality might simply be that you don't have the pieces, the necessary pieces, to make this puzzle fit. And as we work away, there's a really bad analogy. As we work away from the puzzle piece analogy, the Warriors just might not have a roster that works together. Right? Like, this is a team, and it's what I saw on the Comcast Business text line earlier. The 510 pointed this out when we were talking last segment. This roster ain't constructed right, and it ain't Kuminga's fault. We have 6 point guards, 5 power forwards, and 1 true small forward. This team is incomplete, and they refuse to fix the problem. 510, I'm not sure I agree with the way that you have identified the different positions, but I hear exactly what you're talking about. The roster is not constructed right. Absolutely. They do not have enough ball handlers. They do not have enough scorers. They do not have enough players that can create their own shot. And they do not have, they have an overabundance at a couple of positions, and then they have an absolute dearth of talent at a number of other positions. And this is the number one issue for the Golden State Warriors. Why is Jonathan Kuminga coming off the bench? Because he can only play the 4. Or so the Warriors have decided. He can only play the 4 in Steve Kerr's system, in the Warriors' system. I think he could be a 3 in other systems if you attach the right players to him and you have the right groupings around him. But the reality is, with what the Warriors have on this roster, Kuminga cannot be a 3. Because then you're looking at Stephen Curry and Andrew Wiggins as your only shooters on the floor at any given moment, right? Like if you run with Wiggins or Kuminga at the 3, as they did to begin the season, you have Steph Curry, Andrew Wiggins, Jonathan Kuminga, Draymond Green, and then either Kevon Looney or Trace Jackson-Davis. Does not matter. Neither of them can shoot, right? Draymond Green, decent percentage, but he's being begged to shoot from outside. Defenses will continue to do that because they'd rather Draymond shoot an open 3 than Steph shoot any shot. So defenses, when Draymond shoots, that's a win for defenses. It's the same for Jonathan Kuminga. Wiggins, not quite. Wiggins was like the only Warrior who showed up tonight in the first half. Kudos to Andrew Wiggins for that. And then you got Stephen Curry, again, who's the greatest shooter in the world. It does not work with Kuminga at the 3. It simply does not work because there's not enough shooting around him. If you had a big man who could shoot alongside Draymond, okay, Kuminga could work. If you had a better shooter at the 2, and this is not a knock on Wiggins, but if you're playing Kuminga at the 3, you need shooting elsewhere. If you had a better shooter at the 2, a better shooter at the 5, you could make that work. But on this Warriors team, excuse me, Jonathan Kuminga does not work at the 3. Okay, so if Kuminga does not work at the 3, then the best spot to play him is the 4. Okay, what issue do you run into there? That's also the position that Draymond Green plays. And I know Draymond was not great tonight, 0 for 4 from the field, and was a sieve defensively, and okay, whatever. It's one game. Draymond Green is best at the 4, and the Warriors do not want to play Draymond too often at the 5. So if Draymond's locked into the 4, and Kuminga can't play the 3, where does that leave Kuminga? One of the most talented people on your roster. It leaves him rotting on the bench. And that is what I mean when I say this isn't necessarily a failure of Steve Kerr in terms of finding the right combinations and putting Kuminga in the right spots. It's a failure of roster construction and the Warriors' lack of awareness in terms of building the roster with their talent the right way. If you wanted to play Draymond and Kuminga together, you needed to go out and get shooters galore. And I know the Warriors are really strapped in terms of how they can go out and just sign free agents, right? Like, that is a challenge. But you used your mid-level exception on DeAnthony Melton, who, when healthy, a fantastic player. But when is he healthy? Even before this year. That is a major, major risk. And you blew, essentially, your only way to get a legit, talented player in here. And if DeAnthony Melton was healthy all year, $12.5 million, the full mid-level exception for him, that would have been a freaking steal, right? But you're taking a major risk doing that. It's a failure of roster construction for the Warriors. And if you get to a point where you have the opportunity to trade Jonathan Kuminga and bring somebody else of value in, you should definitely consider doing that. Because Kuminga, while he has had a good amount of value around the NBA, he is nowhere near living up to that value on this Warriors roster because he has not been put in a position to succeed. And he's not going to be unless you somehow magically acquire a lot of shooting around him. If Jonathan Kuminga, and I think a lot of us can agree, if there is anybody that can take a step forward and improve and take a lot of the load off of Steph on this roster, it's most likely him, right? You know what you're going to get from Wiggins most nights. You know what you're going to get from Draymond Green most nights. You know what you're going to get, again, from Stephen Curry most nights. If there's someone that can take a major step forward and help you out more than they are, it's probably Jonathan Kuminga, right? How many times do we have to talk about his potential and what he could potentially be 3 or 4 years from now? It's been a conversation that has been talked to death. But he can't accomplish that unless he has the right group around him. And there's no way that combination exists on the Warriors. So he's either going to continue to kind of toil in mediocrity because of who's around him, and frankly, maybe because he doesn't live up to the hype. This isn't all on what's around him. This is also on Kuminga himself. Kuminga is not blameless in this situation, but he's also not been put in the best situation to succeed. You're going to have to make major changes to make that grouping work. But maybe you just cut bait and you say, all right, we're going to move on. Maybe he's more valuable to somebody else, not as valuable to us. We'll bring somebody else in who better fits the style with which we like to play. And then we'll go on from there. The 415 is chiming in on the Comcast Business text line. Get a stretch 5 and the problem is solved. That would help a lot. It would help a lot. The Kuminga possibility or the Kuminga ease of which he could fit in a lineup would certainly be better with a shooting 5. And the 415 mentions Turner. I imagine he means Miles Turner from Indiana, a guy that's been mentioned, rumored that the Warriors might be interested in. Maybe it's more so fake Twitter rumors than anything with real credibility. But he's been linked to the Warriors for 5 years now, it feels. Or Nikola Vucevic from the Chicago Bulls, who has been legitimately, rumored that the Warriors might have interest in over the last couple of weeks from some respected NBA sources. So that could be something that the Warriors look into. I'm still not 100% sure that a lineup of Steph Curry, Andrew Wiggins, Kuminga, Draymond, and Vucevic has enough shooting. You still might run into the same situation where you don't feel like you can play Kuminga at 3, and then since Draymond's locked into the 4 for maybe other than a couple of minutes here or there, you're kind of in a situation where you're still left not maximizing Jonathan Kuminga. So maybe Kuminga is the major piece that you send out to get someone like Vucevic in. The 408 continues to chime in on the Comcast Business text line as well. I truly believe that Pods is incapable of being a 2, like Kerr said the other day. On most teams, he wouldn't be on the roster, but I think it goes back to how rigid Kerr is. Pods is not a 2, and he's nowhere close to a 2. And if Steve Kerr or anyone on the Warriors have said anything like that, they're just being outwardly complimentary, and that is not what they actually believe. Could he eventually someday improve enough to where he could? Yeah, it's possible. I wouldn't count on it, but it's possible. I think you make an interesting point, though, and I'm talking to the 408, how rigid Kerr is. And this, I think, is a larger conversation that we can have. Because if you go into a season, Mike Dunleavy's job is to put together a roster that fits, right? That works together, right? That you give your head coach the pieces to the puzzle, and then you let the coach put the puzzle together. maybe we've come to the conclusion that the puzzle pieces just simply ain't there, right? Like, this is an incomplete picture. You don't have all the right pieces. Like, it's just not going to fit, no matter how many times you try. And you try to really squish that piece in, but the lines don't quite fit, or there's a little bit of room between the knob of one piece, right? Like, it just doesn't work. And that's what the 26 games for this Warrior team has represented. Doesn't work, no matter how many times you try. He tried the Wiggins at the 2, Kuminga at the 3 lineup to begin the season. That was an utter disaster. He tried Brandon Pajemski in the starting lineup at times. That did not work. He tried Draymond off the bench most recently and Kuminga starting. That wasn't really working and didn't really ever make a ton of sense. Draymond Green coming off the bench, I mean, really, what are we doing here? He's tried so many different situations, so many different permutations of rotations and lineups. Stephen Curry is now playing like the first 4 minutes and the final 4 minutes of every quarter. Normally he would play the first 8 minutes and then rest for 8 minutes, play the final 8 minutes of each half. He's trying everything. Okay, so maybe we get to the point where you just can safely assume that, right? Like, these pieces ain't it. Like, we don't have the right pieces here. So what do you do then? And I think this is where what the 408 is talking about becomes fair. And the 408, again, saying it goes back to how rigid Steve Kerr is. Now the challenge, and all of this could change based on what the Warriors do before the trade deadline, if they make another major move, and that might clear up some of the confusion on the roster. But if the roster stays largely the same, then it's on Steve Kerr to be a little less rigid and to find new answers and to be a little more creative and to stop trying to fit a square peg, Jonathan Kuminga, into a round hole, the Warriors' motion offense. It's being willing to, like what happened at the end of the Houston game when the Warriors won against a really good Houston team at home without Steph and without Draymond, to say, all right, number one, with Steph and Draymond on the floor down the stretch of games, it hasn't been pretty. Not all Steph and Draymond's fault, but they are certainly not blameless in the Warriors' end-of-game struggles. Okay, hasn't worked. What did work against Houston down the stretch was Jonathan Kuminga and Andrew Wiggins pick and roll. And that worked without Stephen Curry and without Draymond Green on the floor. All right, let's see now a little bit of an adjustment. Even if Steph and Draymond are on the court, put the ball in Kuminga's hands, put the ball in Wiggins' hands, let them run two-man game pick and roll and see if they could get the job done when the shots aren't falling from downtown and opponents are face-guarding Stephen Curry 94 feet and they're picking him up at half court. And they got Jalen Wells, a rookie out of Washington State, by way of Sonoma State, by the way. Represent the North Bay, Jalen Wells, who was awesome today. And he picked up Stephen Curry full court and essentially face-guarded him the entire game. And Stephen Curry went 0 for 7 from the field the first time in his career. He has not had a made field goal when playing 15 or more minutes in an NBA game. Like, there has to be some adjustment here. When that's not working and you've tried all the other permutations, adjust. Try something new. And it feels like the only way we've gotten a taste of newness is when the Warriors' hand have been forced and when Steph isn't playing and when Draymond isn't playing and they're out for the game. And then you turn to something that worked, and that was a Wiggins and Kuminga two-man game. And again, this might be a conversation that turns out to be pointless because maybe Kuminga gets traded in a month. And I don't know, Zion Williamson is in here. By the way, I don't know if a Zion and Draymond pairing works either because there's still no shooting there. The difference is Zion, when healthy, is the best person in the NBA at getting to the rim and finishing around the rim. So that might be a little bit different. But still not a lot of shooting there. And that might be really tough on Stephen Curry still. So that is certainly possible. But if the roster stays the same, I don't know how you can keep trying the same thing. And there does need to be a major adjustment. The 408, continuing here on the Comcast Business text line, Draymond could play the 3, TJD the 4, and Looney the 5. I'm going to stop you right there, 408. That is going to be an absolute disaster offensively. That cannot work on the offensive end. If Draymond is the 3, Trace the 4 and Looney the 5. There's just no shooting. It does not matter if your 1 and 2 are prime Steph and prime Clay. There's not enough shooting with that group. In today's NBA, where it is threes or it is in the paint, you can't have that. You cannot have that. And the other half of this is the 707 chiming in as well. And again, this might sound like me caping up for Jonathan Kuminga. It's not necessarily that. This is me identifying Kuminga as the most likely option to take major opportunity, to take major, what's the right word? Major responsibility off of Steph Curry's plate. Like, if you are to look at this entire Warriors roster and you're to say, all right, who can help Stephen Curry out more than they currently are? I think it's Jonathan Kuminga. But as the 707 points out, maybe Kuminga just simply isn't well-rounded enough of a player to trust him to be a number 2 option. And you might entirely be right about that. I'm just saying he's the best chance they got. He's the best chance they got. And if you're just going to continually throw him out there and force him to play a style of offense that does not fit his strengths, then you're not giving him a real shot. And you're doing yourself a disservice because you also aren't really figuring out what he can be capable of. And we're getting really in the weeds in how this whole Warriors roster fits or doesn't fit. And all of this is, again, not just a reaction to tonight. It's a reaction to the last 3 weeks. The Warriors are 2-9 in their last 11, and they lost tonight by 51 points. The largest margin of defeat, if you're looking at it from the Warriors' perspective, the largest margin of victory, if you're looking at it from the Grizzlies' perspective, in an NBA game so far this season. Now, Dennis Schroeder is a start to make some more combinations work. Stephen Curry and Dennis Schroeder together, along with Wiggins, Kuminga, Draymond on the floor, that could very, really possibly work. The thing is, the Warriors don't want to play Draymond at the 5 too often. That might be a closing lineup for the final 5 minutes of a close game here or there. But the Warriors are so incredibly limited in what they can do because of the limitations of their aging stars now. And Stephen Curry, when he is at his best, I'm not sure that there is another player in the NBA right now whose peak is quite as high as Steph's. The thing is that the peaks for Steph don't happen as often, and when they do happen, he can't sustain them as long as he once did. And it's not a knock on him. It's the reality of being nearly 37 years old. He is already an anomaly for what he's doing. But he can't do it as often and for as long as he once did. So you're going to need help from elsewhere. And Draymond Green, again, when he was 28 years old, play him at the 5 for 30 minutes a night. Or maybe not 30 minutes a night, but you could do it for a good chunk of games. You can't do it anymore. I was surprised when Andrew Wiggins was out that it was Draymond Green that started at the 5 because it goes against everything that Steve Kerr had said he wanted to avoid. Playing Draymond too many minutes at the 5, it's going to hurt us come April. And he went with it. He can't keep doing that if the Warriors are to have any legitimate shot to make noise down the stretch. I don't know what the answer is for the Warriors. I'm not sure. The more I think about it, the more I'm of the mind that Jonathan Kuminga does not fit here, and it might be best for both if they make a move and the Warriors bring in someone with legitimate versatility offensively that can shoot the ball and that can defend, because that's what this roster needs more than anything else. I don't know exactly where the text went here on the Comcast Business text line, but appreciate all the interaction. Someone wanted to bring up the defense, and, well, I mean, you're absolutely right about that. You give up 143 points on Sunday against Dallas and 144 points against the Grizzlies tonight. That might be the more, I don't know if more concerning is the right phrase, more surprising performance if we're talking about offensive or defensive ends of the floor. It's the defense the last 2 games. This has proven to be a pretty good defensive team, and for the majority of the season, very good. The last 2 games, though, man, has it been bad. And it's the same issues in both games. And what makes it all the more frustrating and confusing is that the Warriors had 3 days off. First of all, they had 3 days off before Dallas came to town on Sunday. Then they gave up 143 points, where Dallas shot 60% from the field and shot over 50% from downtown. Then you had 3 more days off. And Memphis scores 144 points, didn't shoot as well from the field, 54% from the field, but made 27 threes. They're setting a new Grizzlies franchise record. And now over the last 2 games, the Warriors have allowed 143.5 points per game. Their opponents are shooting nearly 57% from the field, and their opponents the last 2 games have made 48 threes. I don't have the numbers to back this up. I would venture to guess 48 three-pointers allowed over a 2-game stretch. That very well might be the most in NBA history. It's certainly up there. It's got to be like in the top 5. I'm not sure anybody has given up 50 made threes in a single game or in consecutive games, 2 games combined. The NBA record for made threes is 29, so the easiest way to look, and I can check in a little bit, and I can get that number over to you, but it's been bad defensively, and it is lack of simple defensive principles. It is turnovers on offense that's leading to points. 18 turnovers tonight for the Warriors, 31 points off of turnovers for the Memphis Grizzlies. Let me track down this number from the Dallas game last time out, because the Warriors actually took care of the ball against Dallas, but the Warriors allowed incredible points off of turnovers in that one. Yeah. So the Warriors only committed 10 turnovers against Dallas on Sunday, but Dallas turned those 10 turnovers into 30 points off turnovers. 18 turnovers tonight, 31 points off turnovers for Memphis. So you're talking about taking the care of the ball better against Dallas. 18 turnovers tonight, that's 8 more than you did against Dallas, but you give up 31 points off turnovers. So actually the efficiency in terms of Memphis turning those turnovers into points wasn't as strong as Dallas's efficiency. The difference was, though, you turned over the ball 18 times. And even if the opponent isn't turning those turnovers into points, you're costing yourself field goal attempts. The Warriors only put up 90 shots tonight. The Grizzlies put up 98. When you are allowing open shots, you can't also be shooting fewer times than your opponents. And the other part of that is the rebounds. The Warriors got murdered on the glass tonight. 60 rebounds. 60, and you include team rebounds, 67 rebounds for the Memphis Grizzlies. The Warriors had 47. 20 more. And you look at second chance points. The Grizzlies, 20 second chance points. They had 15 offensive rebounds to your 10. 20 second chance points to the Warriors' 6. So not only you lose the turnover battle, you lose the points off turnover battle, you lose the rebound battle, you lose the second chance points battle, you lose the fast break points battle, 22-4, you lose the points in the paint battle, 44-30, and obviously in the game where you lose by 51, you are very likely going to lose every single one of those, and it's not surprising that you do, but that is becoming a trend for the Warriors now. It's losing the hustle stats. And that's something that they had won for the majority of their first 15 games this year when they were 12-3. And now they're looking at a record of 14-12 because they've won just 2 of their last 11 games. It's hard to explain and hard to make sense of what the Warriors have done the last 2 times that they've played, especially when they've had 3 days off in between. And you get the acquisition of Dennis Schroeder in here as well. So not a lot of positives for the Golden State Warriors. And now coming up next, you've got the Minnesota Timberwolves, where Ant Edwards and company are licking their chops, waiting for you. And they just had an emotional game tonight because Karl Anthony Towns returned home. He returned to Minnesota for the first time as a member of the Knicks. Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo taking on their former Knicks teammates tonight as well. But Minnesota coming off the emotional high of welcoming Karl Anthony Towns back. And let's take a look at that score here. Give me just a second as I bring it up. Minnesota and the Knicks tonight, that game about to go final. Emotional high of welcoming him back and watching him absolutely dominate The Knicks are going to win. They're up by 28 right now, late in the fourth. And Karl Anthony Towns, in his return to Minnesota, 32 points, 20 rebounds, and 6 assists. Yikes. Wow. Well, Minnesota is certainly not happy they made that deal at the moment. Karl Anthony Towns has been awesome of late for the Knicks, and he's going to lead New York to a win over Minnesota in his return to the T-Wolves and to the Twin Cities. A couple more minutes with you here on Warriors Wrap-Up. We do got to get to, as we always do, crashing the glass, which we always do to wrap things up here on Warriors Wrap-Up on 95.7 The Game. Crashing the Boards is brought to you by Chilton Auto Body, the Bay Area leader in collision repair. Thanks as always to Chilton. Crashing the glass tonight, I hate to do it for a second consecutive game, but I got to. The Warriors were poor on the glass once again. Trace Jackson Davis led the way with 7 boards. Good to see Trace get a little bit of consistent run once again, and he actually was one of the Warriors' few bright spots. 7 points in nearly 20 minutes, including those 7 boards. In a game you lose by 51, he was only a -4. That feels like a major win. So way to go, Trace Jackson Davis. But I got to give it to a Grizzly. When they dominate the glass the way they did, that only feels fair. And how about Santi Aldama off the bench for Memphis tonight? The points are going to catch everyone's eye on the box score. He made 5 threes. He scored 21 points, but he had 14 rebounds. Santi Aldama, 14 rebounds in this basketball game. He gets the honor of crashing the boards tonight, which again, as always, is brought to you by Chilton Auto Body, the Bay Area leader in collision repair. 14 boards. Also, Brandon Clark off the bench had 10 rebounds. Zach Edey had 8 rebounds. Zach Edey, by the way, and Draymond Green got into it a little bit for a moment. And this is another frustrating moment from this basketball game. The Warriors down 30 late in the first half. And I forget exactly who drove to make this play happen. But there was a Warriors drive and then a pass underneath to Draymond Green on the right block, and he is wide open. No one around him. And he takes a little bit too long in the gather, like catching the ball in the gather, and goes to lay it up off the glass. And Ja Morant comes crashing down from the right wing and swats the hell out of Draymond's shot from behind. I think it goes off the glass, and the Grizzlies get the rebound, and they go up the court the other way. And as Draymond Green, trying to recover from the disappointment of having his shot blocked from behind by Ja Morant when he was wide open, no one around him. He gets into like a tug-of-war with Zach Edey. And Zach Edey is just simply running down the court. And Draymond Green is like grabbing his jersey and then pushing him and then grabbing his jersey and pushing him. And then the official calls a foul and does the smart thing and gets in between these two because they have a history. Remember when the Warriors beat the Grizzlies in San Francisco at Chase Center, there was a foul that was called on Draymond Green for essentially hooking Zach Edey's foot under his arm, like in his armpit area, and tripping Zach Edey late in the game. And after Taylor Jenkins, head coach of the Grizzlies, essentially said post-game it's an embarrassment that did not get reviewed and called the flagrant. I think there's a code here is what Taylor Jenkins said, which goes back to something Steve Kerr said when Dillon Brooks committed a hard foul on Gary Payton II in the 2022 playoffs, and GP2 broke his elbow, right? And Steve Kerr said that Dillon Brooks broke the code. That was Taylor Jenkins bringing that back up. That's besides the point. The play was later reviewed, and it was turned into a flagrant one on Draymond. Anyway, so they have history. Edey and Draymond do. So one of the officials tonight got in between Edey and Draymond once he saw Draymond kind of tugging at Edey's jersey, and calls a foul on Draymond, and then just immediately gets between the two and like separates them. Great officiating. And Draymond has the audacity to run up to the official and scream, and he says, "That is BS," like 3 different times, and did not get called for a technical. He's grabbing Edey's jersey and pushing him around the entire way up the court a second after he got blocked from behind at the rim by Ja Morant. Draymond, what are you doing? You're down 30. You just got blocked at the rim, and now you're doing that to a rookie, and you have the audacity to complain about the call when you were fouling him up the court the entire way? Just another moment that shows the Warriors' lack of preparedness in this basketball game. They lose by 51 points. They're down by 30 in the first half at that moment. And that's what's on these players' minds. An embarrassing display for the Warriors tonight. And it's consecutive games where it's been terrible defensively, and now it's approaching a few weeks where the Warriors have not played consistently good basketball. And they're 2-9 in their last 11 games. Okay, I know I went a little bit long here. Shout out to my guy, Cam, back behind the glass. Appreciate him, as always, for staying patient with me. A rough Warriors performance tonight. They got the Minnesota Timberwolves coming up next. That game is on Saturday, the 21st. It's a 5 o'clock tip, which means pregame coverage begins at 4 here on 95.7 the game. Then the Warriors return home, Indiana on Monday, and then they host LeBron and the Lakers on Christmas Day. That is a week from yesterday, Christmas, already right around the corner. But Warriors in Minnesota coming up next on Saturday. Again, the game tips at 5, which means pregame coverage coming up at 4 on Saturday here on 95.7 the game. All right, for Cam Williams behind the glass, for Lucas Alexander for helping assist and getting us all set up tonight as well. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. My name is Mark Randy signing off. Thanks for sticking with me. You might be able to hear my voice going just a little bit. Thanks for being patient with me. A rough night, but it's always fun here on Warriors Wrap Up with you all. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a good night. I'll talk to you next time here on 95.7 the game.